All right, so far we have a single input command, and I made a note here that says we're using a semicolon to suppress showing the variable's value. But we have this input, and notice I do not have the S at the end, so I am expecting a numerical value. Let's gather a few more. Let's say start time. Let's ask the user, what time would you like? What is start time in seconds? Let's leave a space, semicolon. And we'll have a finish time as well. Finish input, what is finish time in seconds? Let me make mine a little shorter here so that we can see it all. And then we'll do a calculation with this and show that to the user. So let's do one more. Increment, we'll ask the user what increment they want on the time. What time increment would you like? Space, single quote, close parentheses, semicolon. And I see I forgot a semicolon here. By the way, if you want to use a single quote mark in your text, just use 2 of them. So just like before when we were doing this with plotting. So let's make an array of times, and the times will be from start to finish in an increment of increment. I don't need to see that. And we'll say the distance traveled. We'll make an array here, one for each time. Let's say, what's the formula? 1/2 times gravity. What did I call gravity? Oh, I just called it gravity. Okay, cool. Gravity, 1/2 times g times the time squared. That ought to do it. I'm just using the formula for distance traveled in free fall. I'll just say formula. Use physics formula. And we'll make a table of that. Table of all the times. This time the single quote mark means transpose the matrix. So by default it will be a row, and I want to see it as a column. And then distance traveled, same thing. It is currently a row, so we'll make it into a column. And now let's run this. Let's go ahead and run this before we go any further. Value of acceleration due to gravity, let's do feet per second, so 32. Feet per second, of course. And then start time in seconds, let's start at 0 and end at 10 seconds and see how far we fall in 10 seconds. So what time increment would you like? 0.2 is fine. These are all the prompts that I wrote for myself. So this is a pretty big table because I have increment of 0.2, but it's showing me all of the values, all the distance traveled. So if nothing stops me, I'm going to fall 1,600 or so feet in that 10 seconds, starting at a standstill, at velocity 0. All right, so that's table, and we could graph it as well. Let's go ahead and graph it for fun. Chart title equals, let's get input. So let's do this one as a string. Enter your chart title. We'll have the user come up with it. So I'm going to suppress that output. Notice what I've got here. And what did I forget? If I want the user to be able to input text instead of a numerical value, I need to tell MATLAB this one's going to be text. And that's what that flag S does. That says, hey, record this one as a string. And we're saving that string as a variable called chart title that we can then use. So I'll just make a note, without the S, MATLAB records a number. Unless the user inputs single quote marks. That's true. So let me show you that real quick. Actually, let's go ahead and just run this one section. I'll show you what it looks like without the S. If we run section, enter chart title, and the user is smart enough to know, oh, let's enter my chart title with single quote marks, then over here we do get a character array. So that is a way around it. But it's always a lot better if MATLAB knows this is going to be a string. You don't want to depend on the user doing that. Okay, so what do we, let's take this out, and that way we can run this whole section at once. The user has given us a chart title at this point, and we have our list of all the times and all the distance traveled, so let's graph it. Let's do it on a logarithmic scale, log, we'll do times, distance traveled, And let's have an X label. Remember, every chart deserves labels on its axes and a title. The X label will be time in seconds. Oops. And the Y label will be distance in, well, I'm going to have to rely on the user to know that I'm talking about feet. So I could go back here and say enter value acceleration due to gravity and tell them what units I was using. But for now, let's just get a chart going. And let me show you how to use the title. Instead of typing in the title I want, I'm going to use the variable that has saved the chart title. So we gather this input, save it as a variable called chart title, and use it here in this title command. All right, let's run this and see what we get. Acceleration due to gravity, if we're talking about feet per second squared, let's go from 0 to, let's just do 8. And increments of 0.2 is fine. Enter a chart title. Notice it showed me the table and then it goes right on to the next thing. Chart title is distance in free fall. Whatever you like. Hit enter. And then we get our chart. Oh, it's log, so that's why it looks a little funny. It's not really a straight line if we were to graph it in scalar normal axes. Anyway, that's fine. So every chart deserves a title and axis labels. We did that, kind of the bare minimum. And now we've seen how to use input to do calculations and report things back to the user. See you next time.